You always thought the problem was yours, that maybe you were overreacting, that silence can also be a form of presence, that he was just tired, distracted, in his own world. But deep down you already sensed that silence wasn't rest, it was absence. It was lack of desire, it was lack of emotional reciprocity. And even realizing this, you tried to fill it. You started conversations. You asked questions. You commented on trivial things just to create some connection. You'd ask how his day went, even knowing the answer would be dry, lifeless, shallow. You tried to listen. You tried to laugh. You tried to keep the mood light. You tried to show that there was still time, that it was still worth it. But on the other side, just walls. You felt like you were talking to someone who wasn't there anymore. Or worse, someone who had never been there. And the cruelest part, you learned to blame yourself for this. You learned to think it was your job to keep everything together. That love also means persistence. That those who love hold on to the silence of the other. That the other can shut down, and you need to respect that. But no one taught you that respect has its limits. That embracing someone else's silence shouldn't mean suffocating your own voice. That caring shouldn't mean disappearing. That listening to the other shouldn't mean silencing your soul every day. Do you realize this now? That's why the exhaustion came. And it wasn't ordinary fatigue. It was existential weariness. A depletion that started in your heart and then invaded your body. You began to fall ill in silence. Just as you lived this relationship, you found yourself trying to support two, trying to keep a flame alive that only you were stoking, trying to cross bridges that only you were building. And one day, almost without noticing, you got tired. There were no screams, there were no arguments, there was no breakup. There was only this, the silence, left in peace for the first time. You stopped trying to fill it, stopped asking, stopped insisting. And what happened? He was startled, because the silence you always masked finally emerged in all its cruelty. It wasn't you who shouted. It was the emptiness that had always been there, now echoing loudly, because no one was hiding it anymore. Do you understand now? Your silence wasn't revenge. It was liberation. And the scream he heard was just the presence of the truth you always tried to soften. Have you lived through something similar? Share in the comments. For how long did you believe the problem was your intensity? That maybe you demanded too much, that you wanted too much attention, that you talked too much, felt too much, expected too much? How many times did you try to fit into a shallow relationship just to avoid seeming difficult? How many times did you cut yourself into smaller pieces just to fit into the silence of someone who never wanted to hear you? Do you remember? There was a time when you even took pride in that, in how you managed to keep everything running, in how you held the relationship together on your own with the strength of a hope that only existed within you. But inside you, something was bleeding. With every ignored word, with every unreturned gesture, with every conversation that ended before it even began, you were losing a piece of yourself, until you realized the obvious. You were living in a house where love didn't reside. You were presence, he was distraction. You were depth, he was shallowness. You were commitment, he was resistance. And when you stopped insisting, he thought you had vanished. But no, you didn't vanish. You just stopped diminishing yourself. And then the impact was brutal, because he realized that his silence wasn't neutral, it was destructive. And your absence wasn't punishment, it was consequence after all. How long could you live explaining yourself all the time? Explaining your pain, explaining your desires, explaining your needs, explaining your loneliness, explaining why affection is important, explaining why listening is also loving. You were overly didactic. You tried to be light, tried to be mature, tried to be patient. And behind all that, you were pleading, see me, hear me, acknowledge me. But he only heard noise. While you spoke from your soul, he listened with boredom. Until one day, you stopped saying anything. And it was at that exact moment that he heard what you never said. I'm tired. And the silence became deafening. Have you ever heard that kind of silence? Comment. I've heard it, yes. Now it's time for you to understand the magnitude of what you've done. You didn't lose anything. You reclaimed yourself. You didn't break the relationship. You broke the cycle of abandonment that you accepted as love. Because the truth is, every time you spoke and weren't heard, something inside you died. And every time you persisted, hoping that he would understand one day, you drifted away from your own perception. But now you're coming back to listen to yourself, coming back to acknowledge yourself, coming back to respect yourself. And this scares those who got used to your submissive version. It scares those who took advantage of your silence, shaped by fear. It scares those who don't know how to love with presence, only with convenience. But you're changing. You're moving from a place of the one who begs to a new space of the one who chooses. Choosing to be where there is exchange, where there is listening, where there is genuine presence. You learned that silence speaks too, that what's left unsaid hurts as well, and that the absence of a response is also a response. Do you realize this now? That's why he was scared, not by your anger, but by your peace, not by your scream, but by your silence. Because your silence now is not fear, it's clarity. It's not punishment, it's dignity. It's not scorn, it's the end of a cycle. And there's something no one told you, but now you know. When you stop trying to be acknowledged by those who ignore you, you start to see yourself with a strength that can even scare you. This is the point where everything begins to change, where your voice returns, where your soul reorganizes, where your presence once again has space. And that space isn't for those who only show up when they miss you. It's for those who never let you feel like you're missing. If this message resonates with you, comment, "I needed to hear this." You spent all day trying to understand. Is he okay? Is this just a phase? Was it me? How many times did you sift through your own words trying to find where you went wrong? How many times did you swallow your intuition, stifle your perception just to keep the peace? But the truth is that he never said it with words. He told you with what he didn't say. He told you with his body turned away, with his phone more important than the moment, with eyes that never truly looked at you. He was communicating with empty gestures, frequent absences, cold silences, and you insisted on interpreting it as fatigue, as his way. But silence is never just silence. Silence is raw communication. It's an absence of effort. It's disinterest disguised as calm. And while you talked too much trying to save things, he hid behind nothing to avoid commitment. Do you see that now? You always fought for both, and his silence was exactly that, a refusal to build together. But look at the irony. It was only when you stopped talking that he began to miss you. Not because he began to love you, but because he lost the comfort of your constant presence. Your silence became a mirror, and he saw himself, perhaps for the first time, alone in the emptiness he created. That's why he was scared, not of you, but of the loneliness you had already been carrying. And he only noticed when there was no one left trying to cover it up. Do you understand? It's when you stop occupying the space that the other feels the weight of the absence. Have you been through this? Tell me in the comments. You gave yourself completely, not just in care, not just in words, but in that invisible strength that no one sees and that feels as heavy as a stone on your shoulders. You held everything together. You managed the moods. You balanced the atmosphere of the house. You noticed everything, the silences, the glances, the absences, the discomfort, and you adapted. You adapted so much that you became a shadow of who you once were. Maybe if someone saw you from the outside, they wouldn't even recognize you anymore. Because that woman who dreamed, who shone, who laughed with her whole being, she began to fade away. Not all at once, but in small daily concessions. You started giving up parts of yourself to keep the other comfortable. You silenced the discomfort to avoid conflict. You smiled on autopilot to avoid causing guilt. Until one day you looked in the mirror and no longer knew who you were. You lost the desire to talk. You lost the desire to wait. You even lost the desire to be heard. Not out of coldness, but out of exhaustion. And there you realized. You were trying to sustain a bond that had no foundation. Because no matter how much you wanted to save it, nothing can be saved alone. And now you know. Your strength isn't meant to be drained. It's meant to be shared. Love isn't a burden. It's a two-way street. And if only you're walking. It's because the other has been stopped for a long time. Or perhaps they never moved at all. If this resonated with you, comment, "I needed to hear this." There's something that only those who love too much will understand. You learned to read signs, to interpret silences, to decipher expressions. You tried to adapt to what he needed, even when he didn't say anything. Even when he didn't give you any hints, you created emotional maps in the dark, trying to find a point of connection where there was only distance. But the truth is, you spoke a language he never wanted to learn. You spoke of presence, of commitment, of truth, and he responded with coldness, with gaps, with avoidance. You wanted depth, he gave you the surface. You wanted intimacy, He offered you distraction. You wanted presence. He gave you absence decorated with excuses. And as much as it hurt, you stayed. You stayed in the hope that he would notice. But today, you realize something more important. Who loves you learns to listen to you, and more than that, who loves you doesn't wait for you to beg for affection. They don't wait for you to stop talking to notice your voice. They don't wait for silence to turn into a scream to feel your absence. Who loves you simply listens, even when you don't say a word, even when the day has been hard, even when your heart is silent, but still beats. Do you feel that? You're not asking for too much. You're just tired of being the only one who cares. For so long you thought they were close. They lived in the same house, shared a routine, slept side by side. But emotionally, you never occupied the same space. And the cruelest part? You only realized this when you stopped trying. That's when the distance became apparent. Because it was you who stretched out your arms, who built the bridges, who made the relationship seem normal. But inside, nothing was normal. It was lonely companionship. It was a presence that didn't fill the void. It was a body present, but a soul absent. And you found yourself asking, am I asking for too much? But now you know, it's not about asking for too much. It's about settling for less. Because you didn't want luxury, parties, or spectacles. You wanted reciprocity, genuine presence, eye contact without rushing, a conversation where you didn't have to measure your words. But every time you tried to open up, the atmosphere shifted. Every time you talked about your feelings, he withdrew. And you fell silent again. You held back another piece, swallowed another emotion, concealed another pain. You began to tiptoe through your own story, as if feeling too much was a mistake, as if talking about affection was an exaggeration. But the truth is this, and now you can't run away. He never wanted to dive in. You only realized that when you stopped swimming for two. And the pain didn't come from the end. The pain came from the realization that maybe there was never a true beginning. If this makes sense to you so far, comment, yes. You've always wanted to be understood. And everything you did came from that desire to be kind, to be patient, to be understanding, to wait for the other person's timing. But over time, that effort began to take a toll on you. You stopped being yourself to be what he could handle. You toned down your voice, you filtered your words, you reduced your dreams, and no matter how hard you tried, there was no return. And you started to lose yourself because love shouldn't hurt this much. It shouldn't require you to rewrite yourself every day just to be acceptable. Do you realize this? When love demands that you abandon yourself to be noticed, then it's no longer love. It's emotional deprivation masquerading as a relationship. It's a need for validation disguised as partnership. You weren't in love, you were just trying to prove that you deserved to be loved. And that struggle is not yours. You weren't born to justify yourself all the time. You were born to be loved wholly, even in your vulnerabilities. That's why when you quieted down, it was liberating. Because there you understood that love that needs to be constantly explained is the same love that will never be fully lived. This is the hard truth no one tells you. You weren't being demanding. You were just tired of living on crumbs, tired of settling for a cold goodnight, for an automatic kiss, for a "I'm here" that never came with presence. You wanted soul, not protocol. You wanted connection, not obligation. You wanted to be remembered in the details, not just in absence. But time has shown you that some people only realize your worth when you disappear. Some people only miss you once you're gone. Some people don't know how to value you while you're alive. They only regret later. And you can't live in maybe anymore. You can't depend on those who only show up when they lose you. You've lost yourself too many times trying to be half of yourself to fit into a love that occupied you, but never fulfilled you. Enough. You don't want much. You only want what is true, affection that touches, words that embrace, a gaze that sees, silence that listens, a presence that stays. And if that's too much for him, then he's too little for you. If this phrase defines you right here, I don't want less anymore. This is the moment when everything shifts, because now you're no longer waiting. You're not waiting for messages. You're not waiting for actions. You're not waiting for him to change. You're just breathing, returning to yourself, seeing yourself with new eyes. And the most beautiful part? It's that now you can hear yourself, and you realize how much you ignored your own signals, how long your body had been screaming, how much your soul had been crying for help, and you silenced it. But not anymore. Now you won't keep quiet. You're saying enough. Not in a loud voice, but through your choices. You don't need to shout. Your absence speaks. Your silence shouts. Your presence where it is loved transforms, and your absence where you were used liberates. Do you see it? This is where you begin to live with ease. And no, this isn't pride. This is self-respect. You're returning home, and that home is you.